Welcome to the Scramble Game Show. We welcome our guest, Ms. Charlotte Rees again. She's been here before with a very fascinating topic. And this topic actually is catching more interest from people now. And we would like to spend a bit of time this evening to talk to her again about her new books. And perhaps we review all her publications for people that are interested to follow her work. So let's welcome Charlotte.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So we'll sort of focus, it's only half an hour in this part of the show, all on your books, okay, on your work, because it's a very fascinating topic, and people beginning to understand it's not totally, sort of fiction. It's getting more scientific evidence to prove that. So let's start from your father's book. Of course, he is really the person that had discovered all this, started your career, right?
Right.
And then go on, what books you publish and so on.
Okay.
Let's lead people to your work.
Well, my father published a book called The Asiatic Fathers of America. This is the abridgment of his book. So when I got into this research, this was the first book that I thought needed to be published. His book was 800 pages, and I said, most people will not read an 800-page book.
Right, you're absolutely correct.
And
except Kissinger's book.
Right. So anyway, I did an abridgment, and this is the abridgment, The Asiatic Fathers of America. So this is the what he had written in his original 1973
so
book.
This book, let's put a nutshell on this, is mainly talk about the maps that he has obtained or discovered.
Well, it's not only about his maps, but about evidences that he was aware of at the time that ancient Chinese had come to America.
I see. Okay.
So this book mainly discusses it from the Chinese viewpoint, because he quoted a lot of different Chinese documents which talked about Fusang, the beautiful land to the east, and described it in detail. So he quoted several of those, and then he talked about the Shanhai Jing, and he also talked about the ocean currents. He thought that they came by the ocean currents rather than over the land bridge. And now, of course, there's more and more scientific evidence that the ocean currents do carry things over. So that's what his
understandable that he quotes more Chinese. Of course, he's a missionary in China for his life.
Right, and he was born in China. His parents were missionaries, so he was well aware of the Chinese legends about coming to a beautiful land to the east of them. And so when he saw the old map, then he tied it with the Chinese legends and said, oh my, they did make it to America.
So your abridged version sort of certainly is like you doing the homework yourself, get you very interested in this topic.
Right.
From then on, you write your own books, right? So what's your next book?
Okay, my next book was Secret Maps of the Ancient World. And Secret Maps of the Ancient World brings together springboards from my father's book, and it brings together new evidence that had come out since his book was completed in 73.
Right.
So this book came out in 2008. So there's a lot of years between 1973 and 2008, and
31 years, 35 years, yeah.
And so this one has quotes over 200 sources, has a lot of endnotes. Of different comparisons of Chinese to Native Americans, and different studies. Does again discuss the ocean currents, a few of the same things it discusses. But
did you also add some references to other, over that 30-some years, other people's work in this book?
Oh, yes.
That's a key, because whenever you publish a book, carry this further, you include all other people's work if you can, at least by reference.
Right. There are a few things that were mentioned in that book, but it's an entirely different book. And of course, it's coming from a different perspective too.
Right. And okay, let's highlight some of the references that you made to other people's work in this book.
Okay, I quoted the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which is the U.S. government, which talked about the currents. I quoted some of the DNA studies. I quoted some of the studies about the plants and animals that were in the wrong locations. They were native, for instance, to America, and yet they showed up in ancient China. I quoted some of the times that things were found in the Americas that were from China. And I quoted Paul Shao in his work, which showed that the artwork from every Chinese dynasty from Shang forward was found in the Americas. So there are a lot of different things like that. I did quote Henrietta Mertz in that, and she...
Oh, yes, Mertz,
it was the beginning of my studies about the Shanhai Jing journeys in North America.
How did she get into this work?
I'm not sure.
Her profession...
She was a lawyer.
Yeah, I know.
A patent attorney in Chicago. But, you know, all of us have sidelines, areas of interest.
Patent lawyer can do anything. If Einstein can be patent lawyer, so... All right, so that's your second book, right?
That was my second book.
All right.
And then...
third book?
The third book was Chinese Sailed to America Before Columbus. And this, I wrote this basically because I was trying to understand my father's map. So I never did like the title because I didn't feel that it tied in with maps.
But it's very provocative in the sense that a lot of people probably will catch that title.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. There were a lot of people that would catch the title, and then so later I brought this book out under a new title, and we'll discuss that later. But this book is no longer in print.
I see.
Because when I expanded the book and brought it under a new title.
Did you receive a lot of pressure or people that are really bothered by that title?
No, but I didn't think that it really talked about the maps enough, because it was not only about my father's map collection, but it was about other Asian maps. So this one is out of print now.
I see.
And then in 2013, this is the book, Did Ancient Chinese Explore America? And for this, I followed the journey on the eastern slope of the Rocky Mountains for 1,100 miles, the journey that Henrietta Mertz charted in that area by using the Shanhai Jing writings and topographical world maps. And she said it fit nowhere else in the world but North America. And so this was that.
And very interesting that she charted the map, but she never actually did travel herself.
Well, she was older, and this area is very rugged. And I probably wouldn't have gone myself. I know I wouldn't have gone myself if I didn't have like my brother or my husband to go with me. It's just too lonely and desolate, and there
right
mountain lions and all kinds of rattlesnakes and kind of wild creatures in those areas.
Right.
So this book was a very interesting journey for me.
But you
Beautiful
apparently
scenery.
you enjoyed. I read the book and you really enjoyed the trip.
Yes, we really enjoyed the trip. And she actually charted 4 journeys in North America. And this is just one of the 4. And maybe someday I'll be able to complete the other 3. It takes a lot of time and a lot of money to be able to go some of those long distances, and a lot of study, because some of the Chinese descriptions, you have to think about what are they talking about, because they're talking about something in an era that's not present, and they're coming from another culture, so they don't describe it like we might describe it. So.
Well, there's a lot of time lag in this sort of description. So,
but they described several animals that are native only to North America, and each in its correct habitat, according to how she charted it.
Right.
And on that journey, I was able to validate 93% of what the Shanghai Jing said we would find in those locations. So when you consider 4,000 years later, and it's being originally described in Chinese, and I'm looking at it in English, and you say that is really remarkable that you can get 93%.
Right. Have you sort of contacted Mertz yourself?
Oh, Mertz has passed away a long time ago.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
Long time ago.
yeah, she's been gone quite a while. 'Cause she was older in the 50s when she charted that.
I see. So this, at least from a literature point of view, I mean, she has written books, right?
Right.
And in fact, her books is quite well sort of sold.
Right.
Right.
Right, and they said that her first book was self-published, and then one of the big publishers picked it up and put it under another title, Gods from the Far East. And that sold quite a few, but apparently no one was interested enough to try to track these journeys down and see if what they said was true. And so I decided, well, someone needs to do it, so I might as well do it.
Did you refer her work in this latest book?
In this book?
Yeah.
Yes, in each chapter I speak about what she wrote about that location, what the Shanghai Jing says, then I quote what Mertz said about that location,
Right.
and then I talk about what I found there.
Well, this Shanghai Jing, of course, is a very well-known name as a writing in China. It's only recently, I guess, the Western world that sort of paid a little attention. And I was talking to you earlier that you mentioned that there is now going to be a conference in Australia focused on this Shanghai Jing book.
Focused on the Shanghai Jing. And they're bringing in scholars from around the world to discuss it. Because if this journey is true, if the Chinese really did come to America that early, the Shanghai Jing claims that they mapped the whole world at that time. So there's no way I'm going to go to the whole world. Other people need to study the other things.
Yeah, of course, that time the world is probably smaller than the world now, perhaps. And they claim they covered the whole world, could be part of the world.
Well, when you compare it to my father's map, it shows North, South America. Some people think it even shows Australia. It shows Europe, Africa.
Well, that's the reason probably Australia is interested in having this conference.
Could be. It could be because.
Can you tell us what time frame the conference? If it's open to the public, anybody can go. Attend.
It's at La Trobe University.
La Trobe.
La Trobe University in Melbourne. And they could probably find it on the internet, but if not, if they would go on my website and write to me,
it's what, in the November? Or,
it's in November 2014.
I see, 2014, November. Yeah, okay. I think if a university is...
I think it's the 12th through the 14th.
12th, yeah. If university is serious enough to hold a conference, that means there's certainly some scholars or researchers already onto this topic, and they find worthwhile to gather other people together in one place and talk about it, right?
Right, and if they're serious enough to have a conference and to pay the way of the speakers to come all the way to Australia, that's a lot of money that they're putting out. So they are very interested in this subject to see, okay, is this really legitimate? And I think it's going to turn world history on its ear. Because if ancient Chinese were going to all these locations, one of the things I bring out at the end of my book, I believe that Stonehenge in the UK, no one knows who built it. But the layout is very similar to that design that I bring out in North America, which is very similar to the Chinese astronomical pattern. And so could the Chinese have possibly made Stonehenge? I don't know, but it's very similar.
The Chinese astronomy sort of is very, at least from reading books and so on, is a very long history. Yeah.
It was the most advanced of any astronomy on Earth, and when the Western world started their astronomy, they looked to the Chinese records to see what had happened in the past. But it was the most advanced at the earliest.
So, that's definitely a good conference to go to. And
Yes.
one thing I would suggest to you, though, I think I have heard there is a conference on this Shanghai Jing, perhaps in China, not too long ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
okay.
think I have heard in the summer, this past summer, some people went to China. So I think you should do a little search, at least through the internet, and perhaps send emails to China and ask some of the people. They may have had a conference like this.
Well, now they are bringing in, of course, people from China. You don't
I'm
discuss the Shanghai Jing without having Chinese there, because it's a Chinese document.
Right.
But they are bringing in people from Europe and Africa, and they're bringing me from America. So.
Yeah, I think, as I probably mentioned to you earlier before, Shanghai Jing was written in a style that people tend to think that's a storybook,
right,
rather than a geographic document, right? So it's probably being overlooked by many people.
Okay, we think that the Shanghai Jing was written somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 years ago. Over that period of time, it would have had to been copied many times. Each time it was copied, there was the opportunity for error or for someone to insert something
a lot of interpretation and
Right.
added information.
Right,
Yeah.
and at one point there were some pictures that were drawings that were inserted.
I see.
And that has led a lot of people to believe, okay, it's just mythology. Whereas at one point on this journey, I come to something and they said it's a dog without a head. And obviously we know a dog can't live without a head. But and I did find that was a Chinese idiom for confusion. And a dog with 6 legs. That was Chinese idiom for confusion. And here in America we say, well, the wolf is at the door. But we don't mean a literal wolf. So I think some of these things in the Shanghai Jing might be figures of speech like that. That might be the explanation.
Yeah.
But I believe that just as the story of Troy years ago, they didn't know it was a real location until someone followed up these legends. And
Have you read the original copy or the Shanghai Jing book?
I've read it in English.
Oh, I see.
Right, the English.
Who translated that, or?
Well, the one that I used was translated by a man named Edward Vinning in the 1800s. And Henrietta Mertz took his translation to the Library of Congress. They checked it. I sent his translation to the National Library of China, and they checked it. And they said, yes, this is mainly correct. But they never did tell me if there are some things that aren't correct. I did find one location where, when I was in Texas, and I said, this isn't quite what I'm seeing, and I sent it to another scholar who was a scholar in ancient Chinese, and he gave me a different translation, and the different translation made all the difference in the world. He didn't know where I was and what I was talking about, but he said, okay, this is the mountain that rises straight up from the land, and that's exactly how the mountain was there.
Well, since you're going to the conference, again, I would suggest to you perhaps do a little search on the Chinese version of Shanghai Jing in terms of the copy year,
Right.
just to see how many versions out there. I'm sure if you use the Baidu is a search engine in Chinese.
Well, I have the Chinese version,
Right.
and I used that in my speeches in China last fall. But most of the Chinese people couldn't read it because it was the ancient Chinese.
Right. The point is that you want to see whether the Chinese version has also being reproduced in different copies, different time by different people. So if you say the ancient writing, nobody can read it, then it becomes not a useful information to verify.
A few people can read it, but it's like reading ancient English, except ancient English isn't nearly as far back as ancient Chinese, and so the scholars of that can read it.
Is this supposed written in Jiaguwen? Not Jiaguwen. Jiaguwen is one of the writings you write on the back of the turtle shell.
Oh, oracle bone, like the oracle writing.
Yeah.
I don't think it's oracle writing. I think it's a little bit later than that.
Yeah. But you say 3,000 to 4,000 years.
Right. So it's copies of copies, and I think over the period of time that maybe it was more.
Well,
more modern.
I think definitely. If you have some time, do a little search on the versions of Shanghai Jin. At least get you oriented. If somebody quotes something for some, you can always ask which version that is from.
Right.
Because if they had described, say, North America, certainly possible people can add information to it based on other books or maps. I mean, since if your father's map, for example, is one of the maps that mentioned the North America or the anything that is related to North America, people could have added information, particularly during those times. This is the 1400s. I think the Europeans were in China, and in fact, they probably brought a lot of things from China back to Europe, which nowadays people have sort of suggested that. But also they have maps that produced partly based on the Chinese map, but they may not acknowledge them.
Right.
So
exactly.
therefore, confuse the whole authenticity of maps that is being produced. In Europe, in the Western world.
Right, and you're exactly right. When the Caucasians first got to North America, they were drawing maps of the whole continent and showing the Bering Strait when they had never even gotten to the West Coast. And so how did they know it was there unless they had seen a Chinese map or unless they had information from others who had been there earlier?
Right, yeah. So those are the things, you need to try to correlate this with history in order to really, bring about a sort of a hypothesis of a complete story. Of course, a complete story has to be proven by evidence. It's almost like if you claim how the world is created, you need to have a hypothesis and then try to prove it.
Right.
Okay.
And then this summer,
this is your latest book,
Yes, but this is the Chinese sailed under a new title and expanded. So it's these two.
Oh yes.
These two.
So that's
but this
the one
one's no longer available.
Yeah, I see.
So I didn't want people to be buying the old version, so I just took that off the market. but this is the new one, and it discusses not only my father's map collection, but other Asian maps that give secrets indicating that Chinese came to America very early. And my father's map, 72% of the place names on the map are associated with the Shanhai Jing and are in the locations where the Shanhai Jing said they should be. So
that's according to the English version of Shanhai Jing, right?
That's according to the history of cartography, which was when I went to the Library of Congress.
Oh, I see.
They said this is the book that we considered the Bible on maps, and it's several volumes. And when I found this map, this particular map, then they said that 72% of the place names on this map are from the Shanhai Jing.
I see.
And are in the locations. And there are several versions of this map, depending on which artist drew the map, or ours are printed, but they're printed from carved blocks, wooden blocks. And so, but the locations always stay the same place from map to map. They don't move around like imaginary maps might.
Well, I think when it comes to maps, of course, people probably always have to base on something. I mean, unless you are the first person born to create a map, generally I think maps are a copy, of another copy of another copy. So it's, unless the creator really takes pain to reference everything, it's very difficult. I mean, particularly in place names of place and so on, and how you locate. I'm sure it's difficult to prove, which one copied which when it's sort of in the same time period.
Well, there are some maps, though, that say, like the 1402 map that the Koreans made. They say right on their map that they mainly were copying Chinese maps, and except for Korea and Japan, it was copied from China. And they show both sides of Africa on that one.
Now, all these books now available on Amazon, or
they are.
They
are all on Amazon and on my website.
Your website is harrismaps.com. Okay.
harrismaps.com.
And they can order directly from you.
Right, they
see.
can.
That's good. Well, I wish you have a good trip to Australia. And,
Thank you.
Melbourne is a nice, beautiful city, and I've been there once.
And this will be their spring, because they're just the opposite of what we are.
Yes, that's right. November will be perfect time. Yeah. And of course, they have that famous opera house should visit.
Yes.
And go beach, and ride their little, they call it, what is it? It's sort of like it's not a bus, sort of a coach bus type of thing for tourists to go along the Gold Coast. That's worthwhile. Yeah. So, and you'll be going by yourself, or are you?
My husband's going with me.
Oh, great. That's great.
I had to bribe him. We're going through Hawaii.
All right.
And so I'll be speaking at the University of Hawaii, too.
Right. So when you come back, keep us informed if you think something's worthwhile, and join us again. We have another session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chang.
Yeah. And particularly other people. You can tell people that I like to use this forum as your platform, and because any scientific discovery has to be put on a platform, has to be exhibited by, and let people debate and so on. Otherwise, it becomes sort of a folklore type of things in that.
Right.
Yeah. So we run out of time, and thank you for coming, and we'll invite you again. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah. So this 3 days trip. Are you going only 3 days to Australia?
Oh no, we'll be gone. We'll be gone 3 weeks.
Yeah, because that's a long.
Too far to go in 3 days.
Right. Yeah.
We'll actually be in Australia about two weeks, but we'll spend a few days in Hawaii going, and then a few days in Hawaii going back.